Hi, I am Nicole Duncan, and I am a part of the WSU Tri-Cities cohort that graduated with their principal certificate last spring from with Kathleen. I was a math teacher and had been a math teacher for 10 years at Pioneer Middle School in the Walla Walla Public School District. And then last spring, right as I was finishing up and graduating, a an assistant principal position opened at Garrison Middle School in Walla Walla. So we have two middle schools, so at the other middle school. And I decided to apply for it. So I'm currently the assistant principal at Garrison. I was asked by Kathleen to share my task one and kind of my process for thinking through that with you. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of scroll through. I'm pretty sure that Kathleen has access to these two documents of mine, and she can share them with you through Canvas or email or whatever. And I also did tell her that she could give you all my email address if you have any questions for me and would like to ask. I'm happy to try and answer and support as best as I can. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and I'll scroll through my task document, and I made some notes just for myself to talk through like how I was kind of thinking about writing this and how I got started, and then like how I finished in my actual like task write-up. So I'm going to go ahead and share. So this is my task overview document. And honestly, my biggest piece of advice for you on this is just to start writing. Because I found it hard to even get started. But once I just started writing on it, it was a lot easier and it kind of started the flow. So for task one, I was thinking about like focusing on this idea of the instructional program and school culture. And so I really had this idea in my current position. Like I'm thinking of how am I going to enhance student performance throughout the entirety of my school. My realm or my job at the time was a learning assistance program coordinator for the math department. And I was a math teacher as well. So it really went hand in hand that I was going to work with the math teachers and teams. It was kind of a district focus for us to support math improvement in scores. So that is kind of my like why this project really. It was the district is telling us that we need to raise our math scores, and we had these principal and building goals. And we also like that has been a focus for us for years. In math teachers and students have been working really hard in like identifying essential standards and assessment and determining how we were going to intervene. And we started using iReady, which goes with Ready Classroom, about 7 years ago, and those scores still are not showing growth. So identified that as my focus, and then I basically looked for data that supported this need. I pulled demographic data for Pioneer. I pulled SBA data from Pioneer, and looking at that SBA data also in those same demographics that I pulled from the report card. I looked at iReady data. So I looked at the previous year's spring results as well as the fall results. And then you'll see in here that I have the winter results. I didn't have those at the time, but this was the like end of my my work is I used this data then for showing whether I achieved my goal or not. I also was able to break down the iReady data so that I could look at students who are economically disadvantaged, because that was kind of where I decided I needed to focus. And I'm going to get into like the reason why here in just a minute, but my halftime lap position, I decided to focus in 7th and 8th grade classrooms and do a push-in model as well as a pull-out model. and I was focusing on those students that were 2 or more levels below. And part of the reason for this is because a lot of what we noticed, and what I'll show you later, is that a lot of times the students that are low income or from low income families, the students that are speaking English as a second language, as well as students who are on IEPs, those were the students that were 2 or more grade levels below. So I was able to focus on those students to kind of raise those scores. And as you can see down here where it asks about like my goal or how it's aligned to the school improvement plan, that was our goal, was to increase English language learners and students on IEPs, as well as focusing on our multi-language learners and the students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so that went along really well with my school improvement plan. I was able to identify some like barriers and challenges, knowing that I was not going to be the like teacher in the classroom. I wouldn't have control over that. And also like what other resources for content that needs to be grade level that I'm supporting these students with when I pull out small groups. And then, engaging those students who are scoring 2 or more grade levels below. So trying to fill holes like with remediation as well as just supporting with the grade level. And then how can that be within the day? Like, can we add additional instruction time to students' days? But we know that, making them stay after school is not always beneficial either. So I kind of went through this and I adjusted this a little bit as I went because there were things that I noticed that I needed to add to or take out as I was like working on this project. So I'm going to transition to my task. In this task, the first component, 1.1, is to develop a school mission and vision. And again, like working through Pioneer, we had a very strong mission statement already about preparing all students for success in high school and participation in global society. So I started by just reiterating how important it is for the staff and students to know the why of your mission statement. And then I really worked to show why our mission or how our mission is connected to our goals as a building, and also my goals as this project and as my LAP position, the goals that I had for myself in this situation. So I talked about that there. And then how did I use my leadership skills and my leadership style in working with the different teachers and in working with the school? And I am very much a why person. Like, I love to know the why I'm doing things. And so that was a big part of what I wrote about here, is that I express the why to the entire staff, like why our mission is to prepare all students for high school and how important that is. And then I also talked a lot about building a team with the math teachers in this work, and like kind of connecting that to me building a team with the school when I'm a future principal. But that idea of like writing norms and showing everyone that you care about them and supporting them, and giving them that support is how you show that you care. But also distributing the leadership so that in this case, like this year, when I'm not the LAP coordinator at Pioneer anymore, how are these teachers continuing the work that we did last year? As well as kind of how I'm going to address change, because the things that we've been doing so far aren't working. And so we need to adjust and change what our practice is so that students are learning. Then component 1, 2 is how like I led the improvement process. So really, this was kind of expressing the problem of practice is to increase achievement for students who are more grade levels below in math. And then how I carried out this work. So I described um, what classes I was going to push in and like how I looked at that. So I looked at data from iReady based on like specific class periods. So I could determine, okay, on first period, I'm going to go here, second period here, third period here to push in. And then I described a lot of like how I was going to work with the students and the teachers with the research of John Hattie. So using like questioning and feedback and scaffolding and also pulling those small intervention groups. And so I talked about that here. I also in this time had worked with the district math team to kind of provide a larger scale intervention when we realized that our students hadn't yet mastered one of our essential standards. So I described that briefly here. Along with this like math specific work, I also worked with our halftime reading lab support person to kind of support this work school wide. And this really became how we were kind of building that school-wide culture of learning. Instead of just focusing on math and reading, we wanted to focus all content teachers on math and reading, like how to support those students in their classrooms as well. So we worked with all of the math teachers to set learning goals with their students based on the iReady data. We also like kind of encouraged staff from different contents to talk to their students about their math iReady diagnostic, to talk to them about their reading iReady diagnostic, as well as like encourage them to do their best and talk to them about how important math is in their subject or how important reading is in their subject, to kind of help the students know that everyone believes in them and that everyone has this like desire for them to do well. We also did what was called this, for example, was a PieReady challenge. iReady also has these like individualized lesson pathways. And so we created a challenge, or it was basically a school-wide competition for students, and they were tasked to pass a certain number of lessons in a certain number of weeks for both reading and math. And if they did that, they got specific incentives. We also did like a grade level competition. The number of sixth graders versus seventh graders versus eighth graders that met this goal, then the whole grade level got an incentive. And we did do incentives for growth on the iReady diagnostic. So when we did the winter diagnostic, we provided students with incentives if they made growth, if they were on grade level when we tested, and that sort of thing, just to help to encourage them. And I talk later about it. I think I talk about it a little bit here, but we justified, like, a lot of times staff or parents might disagree with providing incentives, but thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like, we want to get to that idea of students being self-actualized and being motivated internally to achieve this growth and be at grade level. But a lot of times our middle schoolers aren't there yet, and they want to feel safe and they want to feel loved and they want to feel like they belong. And this idea of helping them to find maybe that external reward, and maybe that helps them to feel like they belong. And then we can get to that next step. But also like that idea of all teachers encouraging their students. I wanted them to, feel encouraged and safe in all classrooms, like just do your best. And if all teachers were encouraging students to do their best, they could feel really proud that they did their best. Maybe they reached a certain number of growth, which is what we wanted, even though they weren't at grade level. And that is really great as well. Then on this same component, I did, and like, this is where I reviewed the winter data, and we did not meet our goal. Our goal was a 10% increase in students at grade level and a 10% decrease in students at risk, which is that 2 or more grade levels below. And we had a 5% increase in students at grade level, but only a 7% decrease in students at risk, instead of reaching that 10. So I did explain like where my data came from and how my work was somewhat successful. We didn't reach our goal, but we have closed the gap a little bit, and we just have more work cut out for us. And then in component 6.1, this is where we're talking about kind of this like reflection process is how I took it. I really just did like a bullet point, like things that went well and things that we can do differently. Continue to use that iReady data because it gave us that access to the pathways, and it was multiple times a year that we could look at it. And then like listing out what things went well, those school-wide incentives, small group interventions, and how we'll continue to do that. And then things that could have done differently, like how could we actually hold students accountable for passing iReady lessons? We incentivized it, but what do we do about the kids that didn't do it? Like how can we hold them accountable? And maybe working with families on that, as well as creating a special iReady schedule. This put a lot of stress on the math and ELA teachers to provide that time. But if we would have done like a special advisory period where students have 30 minutes to work on their iReady, so we're not stressing the ELA and math teachers as much, and also not depending on students to do it at home, because we also know homework is not always the most successful either. And then also this idea of some more internal motivation where you can like test out of iReady. A lot of times the students weren't motivated to do the iReady lessons. And so if we can tell them like, you can test out, you can get to this end, that might have helped provide a little bit more of that internal motivation. And then component 6.2, the last component of this is really this like resourcing and equity piece. I provided a lot more of that demographic data from the report card here. So it was the demographics of the students, and I also provided some of the demographic of the staff, and then kind of reflecting on like why this is important for our low-income students, how the work that I did support our demographics. And I referenced some data, how I compared like where our economically disadvantaged students were in the fall compared to where they were in the winter. And it showed that they kind of had the same growth. It was mirrored as our school-wide data. And so because there was that same 5% increase in students at grade level and 7% decrease in student at risks. And then I have my references here. My first artifact is that overview document, but then you can see down below some of these other artifacts that I used were just our mission statement and our norms, a lot of iReady data and like how I determined where I went in classes, and then some pictures of some of the things that I did school-wide. Like this was where the staff signed for each student talking about their diagnostic, and this was the PyReady lesson plan or PyReady lesson challenge, and the winter diagnostic, and how we talked to it about our staff and that intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation, and like the incentives that kids could receive. And then this is my economically disadvantaged data. So again, if you have any questions or anything for me, based on what I just shared, Kathleen, please share my email, and you can send me an email and I will do my best to support. Thank you.